Ohio is the laughingstock of the US, but if you're over the age of 25 and aren't chronically online like most of us in Gen Z, you might not be aware of that. But don't worry, in today's video, I've got you covered. I'm going to tell you just why the state of Ohio is a meme. For the past 5 years or so, Ohio has been used as the punchline for an endless supply of memes online. Whether that's to do with the fact that you just can't take a nap in Ohio, can't go on a walk in Ohio, or hell, can't even be born in Ohio without having to face the miserable reality of being in Ohio, the state definitely has a bad rap. So let's unpack that. Because personally, I want to set the record straight and tell you why this persecution of the great state of Ohio is unjust, unwarranted, and downright unfunny. Well, not exactly. You know Ohio. It's the largest state in the region of the US known as the Midwest, the 7th largest state in the nation, the 5th largest producer of soybeans in the United States, and perhaps more importantly, it's the birthplace of this eclectic collection of YouTubers. So thanks for that, Ohio. I would argue, however, the most influential reason as to why the youths have decided to make Ohio a meme is because of what goes on down in Ohio. I'm not talking about the business and commerce generated from renowned cities such as Cleveland or Cincinnati. I'm talking about how Ohio is seemingly the NPC capital of the United States. If you're unfamiliar with the term, NPC stands for non-player character. You know those characters in video games with built-in generic dialogue and movements. The characters that don't really make any sense but are pretty much always filled with bugs and glitches. Yeah, according to the internet, that's pretty much everyone in Ohio. Ohio seems to be boring, generic, and so absurdly backwards that it seems to affect every Ohio resident in some way or another. One does not just exist in Ohio. Heck, those of us outside the state aren't even sure the state itself really exists. In all seriousness though, of course Ohio exists. Sadly, I think. So if we take all of this Ohio meme documentation as truth, then I think it's pretty clear that the internet is trying to tell us something. What one can sort of take away from these extremely real and extremely sad depictions of everyday life in Ohio is that life is hard in Ohio. And while I guess there are nice cities in the Buckeye state, many parts of it are run down, abandoned, and dilapidated. And like I said, what's there to even do in the state? I wish I could find out what life is truly like living in Ohio, because that's where I think our answer of why Ohio is a meme truly lies. So I interviewed an Ohio resident, and he requested his voice be concealed as to not be recognized as an Ohio resident. Understandably. Here are the shocking results.
Yeah, hi, my name is and I live in Ohio. Yeah, so there's never really a normal day in Ohio. I kind of just start my day by levitating out of bed, due to the constant radiation poisoning I get from, living in Ohio. And I kind of just float into the kitchen where I make myself breakfast. But you might know this, in Ohio, we don't really have food. So I pour myself a hearty bowl of nails with soy milk, and that pretty much sustains me for most of the day to be able to fight for my life while living in Ohio.
Okay, and could you tell us a bit about what you do for a living?
Yeah, I work in the Among Us department of a local university, the Walter White College of Fine Arts, where I'm pretty much an imposter from 9 to 5. Then I hop in my Cybertruck, get home, put on my Apple Vision Pro, and just kind of zone out until 6 a.m. when I get up and start all over again.
I think you forgot the part where you sleep.
Oh no, I don't sleep. My house is haunted, as are most in the state, with the ghost of Skibidi toilets past, so I don't get much sleep. Don't really need much with all the radiation poisoning coursing through my veins. So is this interview over? Because I got a meeting with Hank Schrader at noon.
It's 3 p.m.
Oh, I know, but I'm still saving up for the whole daylight spendings time. Black Friday can't come soon enough, am I right?
Right. Okay, so the first half of this video was my best attempt at being humorous and capturing the ever-fading attention spans of the younger generations that may have stumbled upon this video. Are you guys still with me? Because while that interview with Ohio's NPC resident may have been an informative glimpse into the life of an average Ohio resident, I really don't think it got to the bottom of the question we're trying to answer here. But I think I'm starting to understand this whole thing. Maybe the reason for why Ohio is a meme is because of the real-life decisions that the state's elected officials have made on behalf of their residents that are so, well, laughable. And let's not pretend that the decisions made by the 75-plus-year-old elected officials of today don't very much affect the lives of the generations just beginning to come into adulthood. Things such as easy access to public transportation, making city and suburban streets more walking and biking friendly, and prioritizing urban development and expansion by utilizing adaptive reuse and reshaping zoning laws that make a city or even state's urban fabric livable without being forced to spend hundreds of dollars on a motor vehicle to get around. The 18-year-olds of today are spending way more for the same goods and services provided to them in comparison to when the baby boomer generation was 18, and the younger generation is feeling that squeeze. We are all familiar with the growing angst millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha have with the lack of walkable cities in the US, and what's going on down in Ohio is meme-worthy. What if I told you Ohio's biggest city, its crowning jewel, its friggin' state capital, Columbus, has not a single yard of rail, light rail, or subway line running through it? A city with one of the biggest and most renowned universities in the US, home to some of the country's biggest corporations, sport franchises, and over 900,000 people, has subjected their entire population to a life of car centricity. And that, I sincerely believe, is the biggest meme of all. Have any of you ever seen this billboard? It was sponsored by the company Jobs Ohio, a nonprofit that works along the state of Ohio and other partners to drive economic development and sustainable growth to the state. The billboard was the main focus of an ad campaign that ran back in 2022 in an effort to try to bring people and their tax dollars from other states over to Ohio. The billboards were placed in a few major metro areas across the US, including Austin, Texas, and Los Angeles, California. And I actually saw one every day on my commute to the west side of Los Angeles back in 2022. It was the one that said something along the lines of, "Spend your life outdoors and not in traffic," or something. And while yes, Los Angeles is known for its horrendous traffic does also exist in Ohio, and in Wyoming and Alabama, and in pretty much every other state. And it's not like you can't spend time outside in Los Angeles, but I do think some of the other billboards seen here are pretty clever. And when I saw mine every morning before work in 2022, driving past $7 a gallon gas stations on my way to work, honestly, it kind of worked. I almost wanted to move to Ohio, but then I locked in. Seriously though, I have to hand it to the state for this ad campaign. However, I think it had the opposite effect as was intended. Reading through the initial internet reactions to people seeing this campaign in their daily life, you saw so many people defending their overpriced, overcrowded cities. I mean, I know I did. I saw so many people like, yeah, sure, I live in Austin or LA, but I'm not moving to Ohio. Because tell me what about moving to a state where most of the cities are on the dying decline is appealing. Cleveland, a once prosperous Rust Belt city built on industry, constantly ranks in the top 10 most dangerous cities in the US lists. And it's been in a population decline since the 1960s. Dayton, another once prosperous Ohio city, has been in population decline since the 70s, to the tune of half of its peak population. Why? It's run down, decrepit, and has failed to innovate. Cincinnati, down to just over 300,000 people from a peak of 500,000 in the 60s. Same with Akron, Toledo, Canton, the list just goes on. So what if the ad campaign had been extremely effective? What if people all of a sudden flocked in droves to these Ohio cities? Well, we know what would happen. They'd quickly see the reality of the situation going on in Ohio. They'd pay less business taxes, but face higher crime rates. They'd come for the promise of being a leader and not a follower, but didn't realize that by leader, the billboard meant leader in homicide rates. Look, all of this is to say that making fun of Ohio is pretty easy when the state is in such rough shape overall. At least in states like North Carolina, Texas, and Washington, you're able to see real growth and investment in most cities across the board. Now, they're not perfect. No place is. But frankly, Ohio just hasn't been up to par. Ohio isn't a meme because a bunch of Gen Zs on the internet started it. Ohio is a meme because Ohio is the laughingstock of the US. It's the epitome of why we're so far behind other developed nations. Ohio isn't an urban oasis, it's a seemingly car-centric wasteland, and will continue to be well into Gen Z and Gen Alpha's adulthood. And they know this. They know Ohio doesn't care about them, so why should they care about Ohio? They say Ohio. And after all of this, can we really blame them? And if Ohio continues on its downward trajectory, it will continue to be the home of the NPCs, where you quite literally can't have a porch, and where you can't even look outside. So no matter how many red billboards try to convince you otherwise, you really can't have in Ohio. I'll see you next week on Town, City, State.